Self-development with tactics. So I'm gonna take the risk because I'm having like, I don't know, 4% left on my microphone, which is not good, definitely not good, but I hope that it is gonna be fine and it is gonna be okay. Maybe I'm gonna just not be that long of an episode. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead with A Force for Good by the Dalai Lama, the 14th one, and also Daniel Goleman. Summary Part 3. We need to become more compassionate to live kinder, happier lives. Compassion and awareness go hand in hand. Now that we have taken a closer look at emotional awareness, it is time to delve into compassion. Is delve even a word? Anyway, starting with where the notion comes from in the first place. In the Dalai Lama's view of the concept, compassion is deep in our nature and does not come from religion. Think about it. Even dogs and cats can be compassionate and altruistic to some extent. So why should compassion be bound up in religious institutions and their tradition? What does compassion even mean? Let's start from here. Sympathy, feeling, fellow feeling, empathy, understanding, care, concern, solicitude or solicitousness, sensitivity. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortune of others. So compassion, or isn't it also like, feeling with others, being able to step into their shoes and see what life looks like from their perspective. Empathy, isn't it quite the same? Well, probably not, because, there wouldn't be two words then. Anyway, in the Dalai Lama's view of the concept, compassion is deep in our nature and does not come from religion. Compassion is superior to and separate from religion. In fact, it is rooted in our biological makeup. Parents' instinctive care for their young, who would otherwise die, is one sign of a biological predisposition for caring and compassion. Moreover, our bodies have built-in needs for positive emotions such as love, joy, and playfulness. These experiences help to boost our immune strength and lower the risk of heart disease. But above all, we are psychologically predisposed to seek comfort in affection, compassion, and a sense of belonging within a group. Yeah, and it makes sense. I've been talking about it before, but I still think and believe that compassion and being a social being, which I think ground up we all are. Of course, some people develop themselves or are being developed into a certain type of person, who is not necessarily very social, but I think deep down we all are, and we were all meant to be so. Because back in the days, in very ancient days, when there was a predator, we had to work together. It just makes sense. Of course, if you think about dinosaurs and whatnot, and I don't necessarily want to say just because it's been the case back in the days, it's also the case right now. Not necessarily, it's just a thought. Don't take it that serious or too seriously, but it makes sense. It makes sense for us as a species and in terms of surviving to work together and not be on your own all the time. Compassion puts our attention on something bigger than our petty concerns. This larger goal energizes us in turn. Having explored where compassion comes from and why we need it, let's investigate how it manifests itself in our world. Find out more in the next book, Summary. Summary Part 4, Compassion in Action, involves fairness, transparency, and accountability. The Dalai Lama's form of compassion isn't the wishy-washy kind that is confined to holidays or Sunday school. Rather, he calls for moral responsibility in all spheres to public life, which includes having a profound disdain for justice as well as taking initiative to expose and reform corrupt systems. 3 principles exemplify such compassion in action. The first one being fairness, the second one being transparency, and the third one being accountability. By treating everyone equally, remaining open and honest, and taking responsibility for our mistakes, we can create a powerful form of compassion to drive our actions. Compassion in action doesn't just mean relieving suffering, but also getting engaged in rectifying wrongs by actively opposing injustice or protecting people's rights. Moreover, the Dalai Lama encourages us to learn how we can reduce our destructive emotions. Of course, feelings such as anger and frustration can also be constructive and not necessarily destructive, functioning as drivers of positive action. Of course, and it is as well something that I've been talking about before, and I like to emphasize and I like to underline because, it is very easy to demonize bad emotions, but in the end, they show you something. If you feel bad, if you feel, also bad mentally and physically, this just shows you something. It can, if you're listening to your body and if you're listening to yourself, it can show you something. Maybe you've eaten too much when you're feeling bad physically. Maybe you've been drinking too much the night before because you're feeling bad physically. Maybe something is bothering you. This is why you're feeling bad mentally. Maybe there is somebody around you and every time you're around this person, after you've met this person or after you've talked to this person, that you feel horrible and bad about yourself and bad about your life. Well, this shows you something. This negative emotion shows you something, and you wouldn't be able to see it without this emotion, this quote-unquote negative emotion, which, of course, it is a negative emotion, but it can have good outcomes or it can lead to good actions, as he also points out there. For example, the Dalai Lama once met a social worker whose group had been given too many cases, making it impossible for them to help any of the individuals. The social worker became morally outraged, and it was with this anger that he motivated his team to protest and successfully get their workload reduced. However, it doesn't take much for anger to go from constructive to destructive. One way to ensure we use frustration to drive positive actions is by maintaining basic compassion towards a person that we take issue with. It's clear that compassion is a recurring theme here. In the next book summary, we'll explore another situation where compassion plays a central role, the divide between science and also religion. And I do want to point out, and I do want to talk about this last sentence. One way to ensure we use frustration, or also anger, I would say, to drive positive actions is by maintaining basic compassion towards a person that we take issue with. Of course, this is very easily said and pretty difficult to do, channeling one's anger. And I know what I'm talking about because I do have a pretty high amount of anger. It is something that I had to deal with and I am dealing with for quite some time, and it's not necessarily always easy, and it's actually pretty difficult in some situations to keep my cool and not rage and not explode and not do something that I'm afterwards gonna regret. But I think it makes sense to keep in mind an important person, and it makes sense to, and as funny as it may sound, but it is something that I've been talking about with a friend of mine yesterday, and this has been about you, yourself, and your ego, basically. And I've also looked it up, and Sigmund Freud is also talking about that, or was talking about that, and there is some sort of theory there, but it kind of is the case that we have our ego and we have ourselves, our thoughts, and let's keep it with thoughts. Our thoughts are kind of separate from our body. We are we, and our thoughts are our thoughts. And a very interesting thought that I got a lot of joy out of, to be honest, is the one of, okay, when I'm getting angry and when I'm just having another destructive feeling in myself, and when I'm feeling it, this basically is my ego. My ego is hurt. It's not necessarily me, but it is my ego. And what it does to me, and what I think it does to me, is it gives me power, and it gives me a sense of, okay, maybe also compassion, trying to understand this person and trying to be empathetic. Well, yes, I am angry right now, maybe because of this and that, and maybe because I've lost that, and maybe because this happened and this makes me feel this way and that way, and just trying to figure out why my ego is feeling a certain way, which, I mean, definitely is compassion, trying to see the world through this person's or this subject's eyes. And it is very interesting, it is kind of moving away those bad feelings, quote unquote bad or negative feelings, from oneself.